Hello, I'm John McCormick, Director of E-Learning Design within the Department of E-Learning and Instructional Support. My group's role is to support instructors in learning to design and teach online blended or hybrid courses and to help them integrate instructional technology into their face-to-face teaching. My group provides support for instructors, including online seminars for instructors who are designing and/or teaching online courses. My educational background includes training as an ESL instructor or English as a second language. I also attended the University of Washington in Seattle for a graduate program in educational communications and technology with a focus on instructional design. I spent 9 years teaching English as a second language to adults of all ages and abilities in the Washington State Community College system and at Boston University. I've taught a wide range of learners, from those with learning challenges to working adult scientists and other professionals. I've also taught in online formats here at Lesley. In this video, I'm focusing on online and blended teaching and learning. In other words, using the synchronous and asynchronous environments together. This is part one of two videos, and this first part focuses on tools that guide thinking about how to design blended learning. The second video discusses a range of examples of blended teaching and learning. In this video, I'm covering only a few blended teaching concepts, things we might call models and a heuristic or sort of shortcut in thinking, as well as a strategy I think that is very helpful in conceptualizing a true integration of the synchronous and asynchronous environments, rather than considering or designing them as separate entities. In a separate video, part two, I'll be covering example patterns and learning activities that show details of how you might design learning activities that integrate these environments. Synchronous and asynchronous environments have different strengths, owing both to the temporal differences and to the lack of physical cues in asynchronous environments. For example, in asynchronous learning, interactions and activities tend to stretch over much more time, often days or more. This time stretch requires more attention from instructors to organization, planning, and the use of exacting language for instructions and guidance. For students, it requires more time management and organizational skills. You're probably familiar with synchronous teaching either through your face-to-face instruction or through your recent use of conferencing tools such as Collaborate, Ultra, Zoom, or other such tools. You may be familiar with the advantages listed on the left from that experience. I think the four are perhaps the key advantages. Although synchronous teaching requires planning, you can definitely adjust more on the fly, allowing more flexibility in the design of your course or learning activity. The ability to see and or hear instructors or classmates should enhance class cohesion and engagement. Social emotional connections are in many ways faster to develop. And of course, it's easier and better at simulating many in-class interactions. For the asynchronous environment, the first three bullets show the key advantages. For example, discussion boards or tools that record interactions such as VoiceThread more easily allow balanced contributions to discourse, particularly when instructions provide clear guidelines around posting and interacting. Students reticent in live discussions tend to be less so in asynchronous ones. In fact, I've seen research showing those students are less reticent, even in face-to-face discussions, when those discussions begin in asynchronous discussion forums. Due to the fact activities interactions tend to be stretched over days in asynchronous environments, students have much more time to reflect, which can lead to deeper thinking and a more self-paced approach to learning. It's useful to think about blended learning as the umbrella concept, with models or strategies like the flipped classroom and just-in-time teaching as examples of blended learning. The flipped classroom, in its more traditional definition, takes as the premise that lectures happen in the classroom and homework happens in students' home should be reversed, with lectures happening online, usually recorded, and then homework activities taking place in the classroom. The simple version has merit because if a lecture is not interactive, then recording it allows students to review parts of it as necessary. And putting homework activities into the classroom can make sense because that is often the most challenging part of learning. Now, the instructor and his classmates are present to help and collaborate with instead of working at home alone. But that simplistic version of the flipped classroom is not the best way to think about blended learning, I'd argue. There are more nuanced and, more importantly, useful ways to think about blended learning. For example, I suggest first the idea of a metaphor, or perhaps this could be called a heuristic or shortcut in thinking. Consider the synchronous classroom time, whether face-to-face or online, as a bridge connecting the asynchronous time periods. Here, the image on the left represents students working individually and/or in groups as a first step leading to integration with live or synchronous environment. Students may begin discussions, doing projects or group work. They may be taking self-assessments, creating artifacts to later share, reviewing peers' work, taking notes from a recorded lecture, answering questions, and so on. The instructor can use interactions or work in the asynchronous time to plan for the live classroom time. This pattern can be reversed depending on pedagogical and learning needs. And across a week or more, the pattern can be used for advanced course design planning. So again, the synchronous class time can be thought of as a bridge connecting the asynchronous time periods. To underscore this idea, the arrows show how these patterns start and play out. Pattern 3 could take place over a week or more. The second useful concept is a strategy called just-in-time teaching, which to my knowledge has been around for 20 to 30 years. I referred to this a bit earlier with the bridge concept. The strategy calls for designing the asynchronous activity or activities with the live classroom time in mind, using the asynchronous time to have students interact with content and/or each other in ways that make learning visible to you. That way, you will have information about students' learning with which to plan the live class more intentionally. We'll look at many examples of this in part 2 of the video. And as with the bridge metaphor, you can cycle from one environment to the other, repeating the pattern. This reiterates the 2 basic steps. I want to emphasize that rather than having students only learn passively, for example, reading an article or a case study, or in some way take in information only, it is much more effective to have them do something with the content or skill that gives you a view into their understanding or knowledge. That can make learning visible. Without this, it's much more difficult to plan the live sessions effectively and efficiently. Again, we'll see many examples in part 2 of this video that illustrates this in some detail. Thank you for listening. Here are just 2 ways to get more resources about this or any topic related to teaching and learning online hybrid environments.